For this video, I want to slow down a little bit and pretend like you and I are having coffee and you are thinking about starting an online business and you asked me, hey, just tell me the story of your business, of starting and running Home Studio Corner over the last 15 years. So that's what this video is going to be. I've mapped things out in kind of a chronological timeline thing that kind of rotates this way. I'll be referring to this as we go, but really as if if you handed me a napkin and a pen and said, kind of draw out the story of Home Studio Corner, this is kind of where I would start and where we would go. If we haven't met yet, my name is Joe Gilder. I've made my money online from YouTube and really from my online business for the last 15 years. I started Home Studio Corner in 2009 as a way to serve the audio and musician community. As you can see, I've got a lot of music and audio gear around me. I had learned how to produce good sounding music in a home recording studio, and I started sharing that knowledge online, and that led to creating a business where I sell courses and memberships to people who are wanting to learn more from me. So that's the basics of what I've been doing for the last 15 years. And it's been a wild journey. The first 10 years were epic. So I was fresh, a couple years out of college. I was working a day job selling musical equipment over the phone, and I started creating these videos on the side to help answer some of the common questions that customers would have for me. So instead of having to say the answer every time, I could just point them to a video I had made that would explain it better than I could over the phone. Plus, it allowed me to get back on the phone and sell more stuff because I was paid on commission. So teaching people was not profitable for me at that juncture in my life. So it came out of both that sense of necessity to create a resource for customers, but also just a sense of creative outlet. I had always enjoyed writing. I had played around with blogging for several years, kind of the self-absorbed, narcissistic, let me just talk about myself blog. But I really wanted to write more. I loved writing. So it started off in my head as a blog. It was going to be a blog where I was going to put articles and they were going to be helpful because they were focused on music and music production. That was going to be kind of my creative outlet. It would be both useful and creative. Then I realized you can only write so much about stuff that people have to hear. So it soon turned into a place where I had articles and videos. And the videos I hosted on YouTube, embedded them on my blog, and the goal was just to have a nice little fun creative outlet that would be mildly helpful for people. Over the few months after beginning, I began to realize this is useful, this is helpful for people. They seem to really like it. And the more I looked around at what other people were doing online with blogs and somewhat with YouTube channels, I started to realize, there's a bit of an opportunity here. And my first big aha moment was, this doesn't have to be a side creative outlet thing. This could be an actual business. It's not a blog. It's not a YouTube channel. It's a business. There was a guy named David Risley who runs Blog Marketing Academy now, I believe. But he had been successful in like a tech space doing blogging for, I think, people who like build computers perhaps or something like that. And he created a new brand to teach kind of what he had learned about blogging. And it was a big aha moment for me. I need to tell him, it's been years since we've interacted, that it had such an impact on me because I was thinking about this as a neat little blog. And then I thought, hey, I might be able to make a few bucks here, right? Maybe a little extra fun money one month to go, dinner and a movie on the blog. Yeah, that'll be great, right? And he was the first person to impress upon me that you can think about this as a business and not just as a blog. And what is a business? A business is something that sells a product or service to customers. And as soon as he said that, something flipped in my brain. I had already started to learn the value of selling to customers. My first job out of college was a commission sales job, where that's a whole other story. They train you, and they do a great job of training you, and then you roll out and you have kind of a high base of salary that slowly goes away over time and is meant to be replaced by your commissions. So about 3 months after you roll out of training, you are basically on 100% commission. And I rolled out and I was excited and I was passionate and I was making all the phone calls and I just wasn't making enough money. And we were very young, newly married, had hardly any bills, no debt. We were in a good spot, and I just still couldn't make enough money. It was the kind of thing where we would put maybe $300-400 on the credit card at the end of the month, and we wanted to pay it off. We didn't want to carry a balance, so we would just always be about $300-400-500 behind at the end of every month. And this was like, our rent was maybe like $400 or something crazy. Maybe it was as much as like $700 or $800. I can't remember, but it wasn't like we were living extravagant, expensive lives. But I just couldn't make it work, and we ended up selling. I had this Martin acoustic guitar that had been given to me in college anonymously. It was like my prized possession. Sold that to make it. I sold it for like $1,200, and that was enough to kind of carry us the next few months. Then we sold my wife's engagement ring, and that only brought in about $1,000. And again, we weren't living luxurious lifestyles, but that was enough to kind of tide us over and get to the point where I was making enough from my sales job to pay our bills. So yeah, you could villainize the company for not paying us enough. I hadn't learned how to be effective yet. I hadn't done all the right things yet, but I eventually learned, and I started to realize, wow, that was really difficult in the beginning when I wasn't making any sales and I felt like I was working really hard and making no money. But once the momentum started to take off, I realized there's no limit to what I can do, right? If I'm making $50,000 my first year, there's no reason I couldn't double that the next year, right? I just need more customers buying more expensive stuff, and there we go. So that idea that my income could be tied to my activity, my income could be tied to my ability to produce value of some sort. Once that connection was made, my brain started to think of other ways that could be true. Then you bring in David Risley saying, think of your blog like a business, and it was all bets are off for me. I didn't grow up as the kid who had the paper route and was mowing everybody's yard and was super motivated and like little Mr. Businessman. I think we've all met that kid. I wish I had been, honestly. I think I would have been able to get places faster with that kind of a innate work ethic and drive, but I was just a normal kid. I did a lemonade stand once and it didn't make any money, so I never did it again. Like, that was the extent of my ambition as a kid. So really, it wasn't until after college and with this job that I started to realize, oh, hang on. I can, in one sense, be the master of my own destiny. If I produce more value, I make more money. It sounded so fun to me. And it wasn't even so much about the money. I was content. Mostly content with my broke, crappy little apartment. I'd never known anything different. I was newly married. My wife and I were like having fun. Granted, she hated where we were living at the time, so we weren't having fun. Anyway, the idea of being able to kind of write my own check and kind of forge my own path through hard work and creation of value for other people, that was fascinating to me. Didn't take long before my brain, because I'm naturally a creative person, I love making music and things like that, my brain started to turn towards what are some creative ways that I could sell something directly to these folks who are coming to my blog, coming to my YouTube channel, learning from me. And initially I thought, I'll make an ebook and I'll sell it for $15 and that'll be the business. Very small thinking. About 7 months into this journey, I've started the blog, started to build up a little bit of a following. I told my customers about it. So I had like a little small audience to begin with. I decided I wanted to launch a proper course, like an online 12-week course that I would deliver via email with a link to download the videos. It was super duct taped together. But a course kind of on the entire music production process from start to finish over 12 weeks. In hindsight, that's fairly ambitious for having never done anything like that before. I followed some bloggers online. I watched how David Risley launched one of his courses or his memberships, and I kind of just emulated what he did. And, had a live stream where I answered questions and talked about stuff, and then I pitched this thing and sent some emails out to my email list and said, all right, here it is. What was the pricing on that? It was something like, I want to say it was 2 or 3 payments of $39, which just seems random. I don't even know why I had payments. I think it was like, you could pay $127, I think, or like 3 payments of $39. No clue where I came up with that pricing, but I remember I sent the email, and at this point we had left the sales job. We were living back closer to my wife's family. I was working a kind of a job at the time, but I knew it wasn't going to last. And I remember sending that first email out, and I remember checking my email account, and first sale came in, and then another sale, and then another. Ended up making, I want to say I made about $3,000 that first month of selling this thing. Now, $3,000, depending on who you are, that may be chump change for some people. That may be all the money in the world. That may be your entire salary. For me, it was a good chunk of money. I had left my sales job. I hadn't hit six figures yet at that job. I was on track to probably do that. But it was getting close to kind of what I had made at that job, working, 40, 50 hours a week. So that was very encouraging. And the wife and I went out for Red Lobster that evening because we were feeling so fancy. Anyway, so that was the beginning. And so then I launched this thing, and I thought, well, shoot, launching this course worked well. I'm going to do it again the next month. And I did it again, and it didn't sell very well at all. It made like a third of what it made the first time. And then I thought, okay, so all my email list was only about 500 people at the time. So I thought, they've all seen it. They bought it if they wanted to buy it. What can I do now? I can create new courses. So I started thinking, okay, let me just make a new course. And eventually got to the point where I was trying to make a new course every month to sell to this list. Because I had a list of people who had proven that they would buy something from me. I had tried to sell them the one thing people had bought, and then I assumed no one else would buy that thing, or at least not right now, because I'd already pitched it to them twice. So now what? Well, what do we do? Well, I started creating smaller kind of niche courses. So I made a course on how to use Pro Tools, which was the recording software I was using at the time. Just here's how you use this software in like 10 videos kind of thing. And that sold. Then I made a video on how to do audio editing. Not that exciting, but it sold a little bit. And I continued I think the next thing I did was like a mixing course where it was 10 weeks. I had finished recording an album of my own music, and I was going to mix that album. Mixing is where you blend all the tracks together and make it all sound pretty. And so instead of just doing that on my own, I created it was a 10-week program where we mixed one of the 10 songs every week. So they would get the tracks. They would get to see how I mixed the song. They could mix the song themselves. Went through the process. And then I sold that, and it sold pretty well. And then I went to kind of resell it the following month because I had this idea. If I sold it once, I remember doing a spreadsheet saying, I sold it once to this audience and made whatever, $2,000. If I do that every month, I started, I did the whole elaborate spreadsheet that I'd be making six figures within the first year. Easy, like without even trying. Of course, life never works the way spreadsheets go, in case you didn't know that. So the second attempt did not sell well at all. I want to say on that mixing program, the second time I tried to launch it, I had like 2 or 3 people join. And it was so frustrating to me because I thought it sold the first time. Why wouldn't it sell the second time? I remember being really distraught about that, like thinking I can't get this thing off the ground. Granted, at this point, it'd been maybe a year since I had launched the YouTube channel. So a lot had happened in the course of a year, but then I could feel the potential that was there, and I could see little blips and starts. It wasn't necessarily taken off. So I just continued down the path of, well, I got to have something new to sell to people, right? So I made some more courses. I made a course on how to do There was a course all about EQ. If you're familiar with audio, an equalizer is that thing that lets you turn the low frequencies and the high frequencies up and down. It can be complicated, especially if you're new and aren't sure how to use it. A lot of people use it the wrong way. So I created a course on how to use EQ. Then the kind of companion to that is a tool called compression. That's also confusing for people, and they tend to use it the wrong way. So I made a course on that. And these were all like small courses I sold for $27, $47, things like that. But I was creating a new one every month or so. So I always had something new to promote to an audience that no one had purchased that thing, right? Instead of promoting the same thing I created the very first time I sold something and just reselling that to my audience, I kept creating new things. I'm not sure if that was the correct approach. It worked, though. I mean, in the sense of it gave me something to sell. It helped me build a customer base. It helped me generate revenue, all those things. So this is all happening within the first year or so. So you can expand that out over a 10-year period, but really the first 3 years was me kind of figuring a lot of this stuff out, figuring out what I'm offering, figuring out my audience, trying stuff, and a lot of things not working and some things working, to the point where I had taken a job with a contact in the audio world. I was doing kind of a it's called a manufacturer rep, where I would go to different music stores and help check their inventory and do training and things like that. I was not good at it. It was not right for me, but it was a stopgap for me, because at the time my wife and I had our first kid, and I just wasn't ready to rely completely on my little business. My wife wanted to stay home with the kid. I wasn't sure of myself, so I took a full-time job with this company I'd been working part-time for, doing this audio work. That was around New Year's. And by July, I knew I didn't want to do this job. I didn't like it. It wasn't fun. I wasn't good at it. And Home Studio Corner was making enough consistent money that I thought, if I give it my all, if I do this full time, I'll be able to kind of fill in the gaps and make up for maybe what I'm not getting from not having that salary job. So in July of that year, which this is probably 2 full years after starting Home Studio Corner, I quit the job and was completely full-time. Our entire family was now being supported. Me, my wife, and little baby Owen being supported by the business that I created. I get goosebumps just thinking about it. By the way, I use this sign in my other business. Whenever I hear something in music that gives me chills, I'll hold this up. So you'll see me do this around here sometimes too, but it gives me chills to think about that all those years ago. It was so optimistic, so young and vibrant and excited, and it was a really fun adventure. Okay, so that imagine that just kind of continuing. It wasn't like skyrocket success. I'm suddenly making millions, but by the third or fourth year, I had made 6 figures for the first time, and then it just kind of continued to do a nice little climb from there. And there was a couple of years in of doing that, I'd started a podcast with my friend Graham Cochran, who you may know from the business coaching world as well. He and we just liked each other. We were both doing similar content in the similar space, and we got along really well. We had a lot of things in common. So I asked him to start a podcast with me, and then eventually that led to us starting a membership together, $27 a month membership that we sold to our audiences, called Dueling Mixes, where he and I would each mix a song. And it was kind of a competition where we would both mix it, our members would mix it, and then we would teach how we mixed each song. And it was an ongoing monthly thing. Back earlier, I talked about that mixing program I created. That was like we mixed a song a week for 10 weeks or something like that. But it had a start time and a stop time. This was an ongoing, every month there was a new song, with the idea of we would eventually grow this into a nice, recurring, consistent revenue. So we're not relying on product sales and running promotions to sell our one-off products. We would have some consistent, recurring revenue. That thing took off. Surprisingly, we expected it to grow slowly. And I want to say right out of the gate, we had a couple hundred members paying $27 a month. We expected that to just happen slowly over time. So maybe it wasn't long before we had 200 members paying $2,700 a month. Paying $27 a month. That's $5,400. And then it just continued to grow from there. It got to 6 figures quickly, multiple 6 figures. I can't remember where it was at its peak, but I want to say it was close to 1,000 members, which is what, $27,000 a month, which means the business was making about $300K. That business was making that, and we would split everything. In addition to all the stuff that I was doing with my business, Home Studio Corner, and Graham was doing with his business, The Recording Revolution, it was just a really fun season. So now, instead of relying on, I got to come up with something to sell this month, which had been the world I was living in for a long, long time, I could still do that, but I knew there was this kind of baseline of recurring, consistent revenue that I could rely on that really would cover all of our bills, and then I would just do stuff on top of that to kind of just, pad it, add to it, continue to grow and do all that stuff. So that was a really fun season. So that membership, we ran it for 7 years. So it started 2 or 3 years after starting Home Studio Corner, probably 3 years in. Dueling Mixes starts, and that really things start to take off for me financially from there. And for that kind of whole period of 10 years, from starting Home Studio Corner to within 7 months making my first dollar, right, and then continuing to make money every month since then, 10-year period of just a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of growth. There were ups and downs. It wasn't like a consistent, just super growth chart, but it was definitely trending up. And there would be good years and bad years, ups and downs. It wasn't always growing. But it was easy. For us early on in that process, I remember feeling like I was a business genius and I should tell everyone how to do business because look at how easy this is. Well, it's not always easy. And around the 10-year mark, the membership we had run for 7 years was it had been plateauing for several years where we weren't getting new members. Well, we were getting new members, but we were losing members too, so it was just kind of staying flat. It wasn't growing. It was feeling stagnant. We tried a bunch of things to kind of rev things up and make it more valuable. We added a bunch of different ways for people to buy. We added an annual plan that had a big bump in revenue, but then it just continued to kind of taper. And my friend Graham was starting to see some real success with his business outside of the thing that we ran together. And I could kind of tell he was ready to kind of be done with this. And so I said, hey, I'm not ready to be done with this because it was half my income at that point was dueling mixes. But it was not that for him. It was probably a tenth of his income probably. He was just crushing it in all these other things he was doing. And I was not. And it began, as it started to descend, I started to really get discouraged. It was going down. I felt like I was trying a bunch of things with Home Studio Corner and none of it was working. I would launch a new course and it would just sell okay. I remember launching 2 new courses that year thinking this is it. This is going to kind of dig us out of this kind of slump that we're in, and they would just do meh. And there was a season where I tried doing a daily vlog thing on YouTube. That was a huge distraction. Did not produce any results for us on the bottom line. I would just try to I went through a season where I would do a video every day. I have like 5 videos a week to try to just like drum things up. And it worked a little bit, but nothing ever really like clicked. And it was kind of like there was this big countdown clock saying dueling mixes is going away. You got to figure this out. And I froze. I was not in a super healthy place emotionally. I was scared of the work. I know it sounds silly, and I've watched videos like this where I'm like, well, what'd you have to be scared of? I don't know. It wasn't rational, but I was scared that it was going to all go away. And that fear drove me to kind of just hide. I would go to my studio. The plan was to work on X, Y, and Z, but I would just watch YouTube all day. And I would take a few minutes to just do the bare minimum, like crank out a video real fast, real quick, and then go back to hiding behind watching YouTube videos or watching movies or anything like that. And it was real. My wife was kind of freaking out about it. I couldn't process what was happening. And I felt like I'd tried everything. I'm just going to hide now. And when dueling mixes finally went away, we had like a year kind of lead up to it. We know it was going away. We announced it was going to go away, but we were going to continue through the end of the calendar year. We're going to cancel it right before all the annual bills were about to go out because they all kind of went out in March of that year. And so when we finally got there, it shuts down. And I was always kind of in my head, I'll figure it out. I'll be fine. But I wasn't figuring it out. I wasn't doing anything. I was just kind of coasting and really avoiding looking at anything with any sort of serious intent to make changes. I just wanted to keep doing the thing I'd been doing for the last decade and for it to continue working. But it wasn't. It was super discouraging. So I started to realize a lot of my success was I created a YouTube channel in 2009 when YouTube was still fairly young. There weren't many people doing that kind of content for this community. So it was like, a chimpanzee could have had success there if they made halfway decent content for that community because there just wasn't a huge... So fast forward 10 years, there's a lot more people doing this. There's a lot more just on YouTube in general. And I had not evolved much, if at all, to try to compete with that, to try to reinvent myself and what I'm doing to make it more valuable. What was valuable 10 years ago didn't seem to be as valuable now, but I just wasn't ready to look at it. So at this point, we're approaching the end of 2019. The business with Graham is shutting down. My wife is freaking out a little bit. I'm kind of freaking out, but I'm hiding it well because I'm just kind of playing the numb husband part. But I get a phone call from a manufacturer company whose software I'd use. So I'd used Pro Tools for years, but then I switched to software called Studio One by a company called PreSonus. And I had a good relationship with them. We had done a lot of kind of collaboration stuff together over the years. I used a lot of their equipment. A lot of the stuff, if you were to look down here at my desk, you would see a lot of PreSonus equipment. And they called and said, hey, can you come work for us? Just out of the blue. Can you come just make content, kind of be the face of this software for our company, particularly here in the U.S.? And it felt like God was saying, yeah, this is for you for a season. I need you to do this. So I took the job, and also at the same time, my church approached me to come on staff as the worship director because the current worship director was leaving. I had done that type of work part-time on the side several different times over the years. And so I said, yeah, sure, of course. It felt like these things were in some ways falling in my lap. A very real sense of God taking care of us, but it was a huge pill to swallow. It was a big wound for my pride. I prided myself, in feeling like this successful business savant. I would look down on people with regular jobs, at least inwardly. I wouldn't say it out loud, but I would think, yeah, I'm better than you because I work for myself. And I got to a point where I was taking jobs, multiple jobs with companies, like a company and a church, like doing a job. Now, granted, there was a lot of freedom. I was still working from home. I could do what I want, set my own schedule. I just had to get the work done. So it was the best case scenario as far as jobs go. But man, my pride took a hit because I was never supposed to have a job, and now I had a job, and that sucked. It sucked. Even though the companies were great, the church thing is great, and they were great. I was just mad. And I made the best of it, and I did good work for both. But what it did, and also this little thing called COVID happened the following year. So I take the job, and within 4 months, we're in a global pandemic lockdown thing. And suddenly, I'm real thankful for this extra income and the fact that I was working from home anyway. But what the job gave me was a salary, of course, a couple salaries to make us fine financially. We could pay all of our bills. We would be okay financially. And the income from Home Studio Corner plummeted in 2020. It was still making just barely six figures in 2020 because I had basically taken these jobs and gone down to just kind of bare minimum. Was still making a weekly YouTube video, still sending out weekly emails, but I wasn't promoting much at all. I wasn't doing promotions. There was no new things to buy. It was just kind of status quo, just keep the thing from dying while I take these jobs to kind of pay the bills because that's what needs to happen. And honestly, I feel embarrassed talking about that now, like that was this big, massive failure. But hindsight, it was the right thing for me and my family. It was the right path for me to take because it gave us, when I say us, I mean my wife and I, because she's integral to everything I do in business. It gave us this breathing room to be able to say, for a season now, we don't have to worry about money coming in, right? I could just, as long as I was doing my work, paychecks would just come, whether I did a promotion or not, right? Because I'm working for a company. I've got a regular old job like I hadn't had in a decade. And then I could just look more closely at the business, and I could do something that I first heard about in the book Good to Great by Jim Collins. I could face the brutal facts of reality. I had been hiding from the brutal facts of reality really for years. And for a long time, those facts were pretty good, right? I was just having success because right place, right time. I was doing a lot of good things, a lot of the right things, but it was also just a timing piece. And I'd never really gone through any sort of prolonged period of adversity. And I certainly thought I could do no wrong. There was no way anything I was going to do. The problems I was facing were certainly not my fault. That's where my head was. And so with this step back, so every month prior to taking this job, I was having to kind of figure out what are we going to promote? Am I going to make something new? Are we going to run a sale? What are we going to run a sale on? Maybe we can make a new bundle of these products we've created, because I had like 15, 20 products at that point. And I would do these things, and it would just kind of go, it would make a little bit of money, but it would never be this like, yes, that clearly worked. I remember right before taking the job, we did our big Black Friday end of the year sale, and it just wasn't great. And I was super discouraged. And so once I licked my wounds for a few months and was able to say, okay, this is the new normal. I have money coming in. I'm not scrounging to create an income every month with a new promo. I could look at the business and say, what's not working here? And it was a difficult process, but I basically got to the point of admitting to myself I wasn't proud of what I was selling. I had created a bunch of different courses. It was a real hodgepodge of music production training that they were all kind of one-offs. They all really were focused on a specific piece of the music production process and not even in a cohesive way. If you came to me and said, hey, teach me audio production, music production, I would say, oof, okay, you need take this course to learn kind of this piece of it, then take this one, but make sure it goes with this one and this one, because those all kind of go. I literally did not have a path for people to take if they wanted to come to me and say, I want you to teach me the process. I had one thing that taught the process, maybe a little too big picture. That original course I created that was kind of took you through the process. I'd made a couple of new versions of that, but it didn't go deep enough into any one piece. It was a good overview because you could see the whole process happen over the course of 19 videos, 19 weekly videos or whatever, but it was still not in-depth enough to really teach you anything. And the stuff that was more in-depth was almost too in-depth and too focused on a specific piece, right? It would be like if I was giving you a course on how to create a really great script for your course that you're selling. That might be valuable, but if that's like a random course that I sell you here on the joegilder.biz website, and there's another one that's random course about how to create the right offer. Those are all well and good, but they really only make sense if they're within the context of a bigger framework. So those aren't great examples, but that was where I found myself looking at the core offerings. We wrote them each on sticky notes and put them on the kitchen island. And I remember looking at these and being like, would I say honestly to myself, I'm proud of this. I would be proud to have a friend go through this course, to have my mother go through or whatever. And I got to the point where I was almost proud of none of them. If I was really honest, I would say I'm not very proud of it. It's not very good. I've gotten better at the stuff that I'm doing in those videos, the stuff that I'm teaching, the stuff that I'm demonstrating. I would be better if I redid that. But I never wanted to redo it because it was such a big, huge ordeal, a big task. And I thought it'd be easier to just do another one-off thing. Let's create a 4-video course on something very specific and sell it. But let's not solve the bigger glaring issue, the big gaping wound in the business of there's no core offerings here to help people achieve a real, tangible outcome. There's no transformation here. It's just a bunch of information kind of hodgepodged together. So what was the takeaway? Well, first takeaway was to sit and feel sorry for myself for a little bit. But the bigger takeaway was, all right, if we were to imagine starting this business from the beginning, how would we structure it? And I realized there would be three main courses, 3 main amazing flagship courses on the 3 main parts of the music production process: recording, mixing, mastering. Those are 3 very distinct parts of the process. They each have their own workflows, their own processes, their own things to figure out. They're all fairly deep and they're fairly separated. If I could teach you each of those 3 things, you would be well on your way to making some great music in your home studio. I did not have that. I didn't have anything about mastering almost at all. I had a hodgepodge of things on recording various different things, but nothing unified. And I had a bunch of different mixing related courses, but nothing that taught you a cohesive process for how to mix a song from start to finish. And the one that I did have that was closest to that, I didn't think was very good. So we set out to redo everything. And we decided to start with mixing, even though that's the middle part. If it's a 3-step process, that's the middle part. Started there because that's the one people want to learn about the most. So I figured let's start there and we'll kick things off. And that began a 3-year journey of switching our system over to Kajabi because we knew that was how we wanted that to be our framework moving forward for everything we did, which was a whole headache we'll talk about another day. Not the Kajabi part, but just switching systems. I've done it several times and it's no fun. I've done was in Infusionsoft for years, was in a few different systems before that, a lot of WordPress stuff, eventually landed in Kajabi, which is wonderful, but the whole changing system stinks. So just start with Kajabi and stick there. And there's a link in the description if you want to use my affiliate link for Kajabi. It's wonderful. But that was part of the process, and then just creating this really good flagship course and then selling it. And it was about a 3-year process of doing that for the mixing course, kind of regrouping ourselves, doing it for the recording course. That one took about 6 months to make because it was really in-depth. It's probably 80 hours of content or 80 videos and 20 hours. I forget. It's a lot. But it was all that that was what it needed to be something I was proud of. And then we finished up with the mastering course. That sold really well too. So, and now, sitting here talking to you now, I have those 3 flagship courses. I've got a membership that I've had forever, but has revamped with a new level. So there's actually some significant revenue coming in from that every month. And I'm actually, as I'm shooting this, I'm working on a new songwriting course. So that's a new course that I've not touched that will fit in nicely with the 3 flagship courses that I have. But all those old courses that I had, most of them are gone forever. Like if you bought it, you can still access the material, but I'm not promoting it. I'm not selling it because I'm not proud of it. There were a few that I was proud of, and those have become either bonuses with the flagship courses, or they've become upsells or like order bump things to sell to people who want to kind of dive into a specific thing, but only because they're buying the big picture thing, and this gives them a little extra training on a very specific piece of that they might want to learn more about. For example, they bought my mixing course. I've got an upsell for a vocal mixing course that dives really deep into how to mix vocals, because vocals are a pain and it takes a lot of work to get them right. But most of that old stuff is gone forever. You only know about it if you own it, because you can log in and still access the old stuff. It was a painful process, but the net result is we got 10 years of things going fine, and then about year 10, things kind of fall apart. About a 3-year period of really rebuilding everything. And then last year, we were at the point where that process we had set out to start 3 years prior was finished, and things were working. And this past calendar year, I quit the church job, quit the Personas job, went down to just doing some contract work with them, and am back to doing what I love, which is Home Studio Corner, full time. And we had our best year we've ever had over the course of the 15-year period this last year, the same year that I quit these other jobs. So the point here isn't, still not a multi-billionaire, right? But the thing that I thought was just going to go away forever about 5 years ago, with intentional, humble, being willing to look at the brutal facts of reality, we were able to turn this thing around. It wasn't quick. It wasn't fast. It wasn't the makings of a great movie story. It was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of time. It was a lot of effort. It was a lot of banging your head against a wall. It was a lot of saying, man, I thought that was going to work, and it didn't. But we stayed the course, and we were able to figure out our way out of that problem. So I hope this has been encouraging for you. I recognize that this is not the kind of content that people want to watch. They don't want to learn about the struggle. They want to learn about the big win at the end. There were big wins at the end, but even as I'm shooting this, right now as I'm shooting this month has been kind of a crap fest here at my business. We tried a promotion. We pushed back a launch because we're not ready to launch it, that new songwriting course, and then tried a different promotion to a small group of people that I thought would do well, didn't do well. And that bums me out. And I know, kind of already analyzing it, looking at the brutal facts, I've already kind of created a simple spreadsheet that shows why this promo didn't work, and a similar one that we did about 6 months ago did work. And now I'm, face palming myself because I should have done those other things that I didn't do. That's part of the journey. You do postmortems on stuff that doesn't work, and you learn, okay, why didn't that work? And on the stuff that does work, why did that work? Some of it's guesswork, but some of it you can really look at the data and say, I did this, this, and this, and got this result. So chances are those 3 things I did led to that result, because when I did it again and I left off those 3 things, I didn't get anywhere near the same result. So that is the nature of running business. It's really easy with a business like this, where you're teaching things, you are the brand in a lot of ways. It's really easy to tie your identity up in that. It's important to separate those. Failure is an event, not a person. Failure is not who you are. It's just a thing that happens over the course of doing anything worth doing. I write songs, and sometimes they're terrible. I record guitar parts, and sometimes it comes out terrible. That doesn't mean I'm terrible. It's just par for the course. The best, think of the most, the person you aspire to be in whatever niche you're in, that person does terrible things. That person has bad days. That person has failures. That person bakes a cake and it collapses on itself, even though they're a world-class baker. Those things just happen. And the more we can normalize that, the more we can say, "Boo, that hurts, but it's not who I am. I can learn from it and move on." Hopefully this has been encouraging for you. Leave a comment below. Let me know, where are you in your journey? Are you in the pre-launch phase where you're thinking about putting something out there, but you're scared, or you're just kind of working your way up to it? Have you been doing this for a while and it's all become dull and boring and you feel like you're kind of stagnant, like I talked about? Or are you in like a brutal facts phase where you're realizing how much needs to be fixed and you're overwhelmed by that? Or maybe you've come on the other side of that and you're saying, man, I went through that, wouldn't want to do it again, but it was worth it because it got me to where I need to be. Would love to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you.